Peggy, how does a parent know if their child is getting all the nutrition that he or she needs?
I think the really key thing is well child checks and going to see the pediatrician, getting measurements for height growth, especially height growth. If a child is growing in height, and I realize that that doesn't give you an idea on a meal-to-meal or day-to-day basis, but it's all the assurance that you need. If you see that your child is growing at their well child checks, then you know that they're doing a good job of eating enough, just the right amount. And that's, again, going back to that division of responsibility. You put the food on the table, you do that, you get into the meal and snack habit, which to me means 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day. Then you're offering the food at regular intervals. Then you just relax and know that your child will take over and eat the food that they need in order to grow.
Again, too much emphasis is being placed on food, and it's not a 1 meal or 2 meals. It's what's happening in a pattern over time, and sometimes people just don't eat. They're just not hungry, and that's a wise thing to do. If you're not hungry, you should not eat. But these kids are active and running around. If they weren't nutritionally adequate, they'd lose energy. Right? They'd be cranky and crabby and not energetic. So they're just worrying too much about that. If kids get the stomach flu and they don't eat or drink for hours, people are calling on the phone certain that they're going to be dehydrated or they lost a pound. You gain it back quickly. You eat more the next day because you didn't get some today. There's just too much worry about how much food is taken in.
Penny, how can a parent tell if their child is too heavy or too thin?
Ideally, parents would be coming to the office to get regular well baby checkups. And during those well baby checkups, we check both height and weight. Over the age of 2, we take those numbers and we put it into an equation. We come up with what's called a body mass index. A healthy body mass index is between the 5th and the 85th percentile. If you're less than the 5th percentile, you're considered underweight. If you're over the 85th percentile, you're considered overweight or an unhealthy weight. Most of the time that's true. There are some kids that are just stocky, and you look at them, they have big muscles and big hands and feet, and they're going to fall sometimes out of that 85th percentile. So I don't use that as a hard, fast rule. But I do calculate the body mass index and talk with families. If you're falling outside of that 85th percentile, above that 85th percentile, you're at risk for secondary health conditions, high blood pressure, sleep apnea, hypertension.
Well, some children and families are heavy people. And so you can sort of look around the room and see, well, these are big people that this child is coming from, so I can expect that that child might even be pushing the 85th percentile on that weight for height index. But for the most part, children will follow a pattern of growth, and deviations from that pattern deserve some investigation. So a few questions, what's been going on in the family, because if there's some psychological turmoil or emotional turmoil going on. I remember one parent who came to see me with her little girl who had taken a big left turn up the weight grid. And the pediatrician had sent her to see me because she was getting too heavy. And so we took a careful look at that growth chart. And when that deviation happened, I asked the mom, so what's going on right here? And she said, I don't know, let me think about this. And she said, oh my goodness. Now this was a toddler, this was a 3-year-old. And at about age 2, she made this big deviation. And when Mom thought about it, she said, I was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was 2. And so there was upheaval in the family, a lot of emotional turmoil for the mom and dad, and maybe even everybody that was in this child's environment. And they ate differently. And she certainly may have eaten differently. She may have also behaved differently. Maybe the family uses food to calm themselves emotionally. And so that was part of what was going on in that environment. So I think the growth chart can be very telling for changes, dramatic changes. But the first thing that you should probably do is just make sure that the plots are correct, because plots can be off. And so then you have to use your own visual evaluation, like look the child over and say, that just doesn't look quite right. Let's go check that.
Studies show that most parents don't see their child as being overweight, which is a problem. They'll have a doll or a model, and they appreciate that model or that doll is overweight, but they look at their child with the same percentage over, and they don't see it. They also believe that this is just a phase that their child's going through, that they were chubby at this age too, and when they get their growth spurt, they're going to grow out of this. That may be true. The problem is they probably are developing eating habits that are going to stick with them for a lifetime. So even if they do maybe get athletically inclined in high school and become more active, they've really set some bad habits in the foundation that really needs to be looked at.
I think, though, too, that there's something that Peggy touched on earlier. We do have to be cognizant of the fact that parents tend to sometimes obsess. I think we're also seeing these days where parents think their kids are overweight and are, fat, and they're so concerned about that. And that is linked to some adverse outcomes as well. For example, a higher risk for eating disorders, which that's a pretty frightening thing as well. And actually, sometimes when parents are so overly concerned or they focus too much on food and body weight, that can actually push children towards obesity. So that's something we have to be on guard for, I think.
The thing about getting the right amount of food and therefore body weight, perhaps, is that the parent just needs to be consistent. And by that, I go back to that, again, that division of responsibility. If you just bring your family to the table for all their eating and model that for your children, you put the food out on the table. Because like Tonya was saying, we can sometimes push our children in the direction that was not intended. And sometimes as healthcare providers, we can push parents in a direction that's not intended. So we want to be very careful about that, because I think that children do overeat when they sense some food insecurity. Like if they think, oh my, all of a sudden, mom's not serving me cheese, what's going on with this? And so when you get the chance to eat cheese, you eat more cheese than what you would have eaten had cheese always been there and not starting to disappear from the diet of the family.